Oh my God, you could actually wear clothing that stretched, clothing that was comfortable. Yeah, so it became a big push how you were going to bring that into your everyday life. What's happened to fashion? Where are we at? Are we little hamsters on a fashion treadmill and it just keeps going around and around? What happened to individuality? What happened to personal creativity? Well, as a fashion historian who was there in the 60s as one of the original flower children, I'm here to tell you. We're going to start with the 50s. Seriously? Who's going to look like any of these people? I was never going to look like Grace Kelly. I was never going to look like Elizabeth Taylor. It was just all kind of an unattainable dream. But here's basic point. You didn't come off looking like a young person. You came off looking like a miniature mini-me of your mother or the first lady, Mamie Eisenhower, or whoever was out there. But there was no expression whatsoever. And actually, there was almost no mass-produced clothing except, believe it or not, for Sears catalog or J.C. Penney's catalog. No, there were not stores. There were just catalogs, and those were started around 1900, 1905. Yeah, that has obviously morphed a long way, but now something happened, and we hit the 60s. 1960, I'm 15. By 1963, hello, the youthquake is happening. Everything is about youth. This is hysterical too. When I asked for this research, I said, okay, so I want research of love-ins, flower children, friend manager, half my age says, Diane, what's a love-in? Oh, what's a flower child? I'm like, oh my God, I'm so ancient. This was not about clothing you bought off the rack. This was freedom. This was about going to the Salvation Army and picking up turn of the century, beautiful white eyelet petticoat, painting your face with flowers and letting your hair go wild. And then came, and this is what's so interesting about this period, an absolutely conflicting, almost tsunami of fashion statement, which was English mod girl. And you couldn't be both, because you were going to have to cut your hair a la Vidal Sassoon, very architectural, as opposed to all curly and wild. You were going to dress in mod dresses, little A-line mini dresses, as opposed to ankle-length, turn-of-the-century petticoats. It was unbelievable. First, I chose Flower Child, living in L.A., and then I kind of skipped my first semester at UCLA, long story, and went and lived in Swindon, London, and became a mod girl, because there was flower children were not altogether happening in London. Those were cries of freedom. And believe me, there were plenty of adults on the street who were saying terrible things to you because you were either a flower child or a mod girl. Adulthood did not like either of these trends. They felt out of control, and quite frankly, they were. And that is when I opened up my boutique on Fairfax Avenue. I'm a hog for you, baby, because we thought that was the first rock and roll song ever performed. And in walked Cher. We made little wild mod dresses. My specialty was making these mod A-line dresses. This was after I got back from London. Like see-through colored plastic. They were only $10 a piece, the dresses, so you could afford to think, I don't think I could wash plastic. And Cher came in and bought off the entire store. She bought every dress in the store. And so I was on my way because my entire goal in life, my raison d'etre, my reason for getting up every morning was I was going to become a fashion designer. I was born to do that, and the truth is I was. I had a few obstacles along the way, like a family that disowned me because it was all just too wild. Good women didn't work. They just got married. Not only was I rebellious fashion-wise, but I was rebellious in a societal way as well. Okay, so I spent the rest of the 60s into the early 70s dressing rock and roll stars like Jimi Hendrix, embroidering, slashing, beading, hand painting, denim. I loved it. But at a certain point, I had to say to myself, you know what? You're in your mid-20s now. The music scene is changing. You're not going to go anywhere like this. You've got to get yourself to the epicenter of fashion, New York. In the meantime, we had never seen mass-produced clothing before. But now it was beginning to happen. One of the really huge pushes was Charlie's Angels. So, oh my God, it was three women who could actually do karate and carry guns, and they were competent, but they were beautiful. And of course, they were ordered around by men. And then here's the fascinating part. Here comes Charlie's Girls. And what is that? Perfume. Now you are into the beauty end of the business, which is scent, and scent becomes as important as optics and how you look. Charlie's Girl, it was Shelley Hack, that was the model. The commercial, I'll never forget it. She gets out of a limo, she comes walking into a club, she throws her jacket to somebody. She's ultra confident, she's cool, she's Charlie's Girl. And they had a special song for it. OMG. And then, of course, each of the angels, like Jocelyn Smith, Farrah Fawcett, becomes very famous in their own right as a beauty. And Jocelyn Smith starts a very long-lasting fashion line that appeals to the masses, never done before, with Kmart. I remember Thursday night at Bloomingdale's on 60th Street in Manhattan was perfume night. I cannot tell you the number of girls I know who hung out at perfume counters, whether it was Giorgio Beverly Hills or it was Charlie's Girl, and found their future husband. It was a social scene. Fashion became a way to hook up, a way to fulfill your dreams, a way to get the man of your dreams. It was just amazing to me what the message was. And it was also the very first time that clothing became truly mass produced. Although it was still made in America, there was a strength. And that meant you chose your favorite brand and you looked like other women. But you were all this herd mentality and you identified with one another. The other thing I remember too is the colors were so difficult. Like the 70s was avocado green, sunflower gold, orange, brown. Not exactly my colors, but okay. So now we're into feeling like you're part of something and that there's strength in numbers. And then women like Mary Tyler Moore or That Girl come on air and they're about women who are competent, women who are in the workforce. Whoa. Women who maybe are a little paranoid about marriage and traditional roles. And that was revolutionary. I remember in that particular sitcom, That Girl, I mean, it was like totally unrealistic. I don't know, secretary, but she's wearing Courage, Paris Couturier, Pierre Cardin, Yves Saint Laurent, but she looked great. And now suddenly, television, with the beginning as Charlie's Angels, is dictating how we should look. It's as powerful as fashion magazines. And I would say that 70s was the beginning. You know, in the 70s, there were still so many places a woman was not even allowed to wear pants. Do you know still in New York City, women's clubs, the really traditional ones, men's clubs, the Harvard Club, the Yale Club, the Metropolitan Club, you're not allowed to wear pants. They really look down on it. Have we come a long way, baby? I would say so. The 80s hit. So we're talking Jane Fonda, leg warmers, fashion workout clothing that you actually wore to work. But we're also talking about the introduction of shocking, shock of all shocks, fashion jeans. Calvin Klein, Brooke Shields. Oh my God, we are so taken aback by that statement and endless debates about does that mean she doesn't wear underwear with her jeans? Well, frankly, the jeans were so tight, it was kind of a relief to think Really? Do I have to wear underwear and that's going to make me look 2 ounces fatter? We had never thought of jeans as fashion. You bought men's jeans in a hardware store. I'm not kidding. Was it Levi's 501s? But that was it in indigo. And then if you wanted them another color, you had to wear them for 10 years and keep bleaching them. The whole thing with Jane Fonda, and interestingly enough, about 12, 15 years ago, Jane Fonda was thinking of going back into the world of exercise, but for older people at the time, a lot of chair exercises. I was picked to be the designer for the clothing end of it. Bottom line is the industry did not think it would work. They were right. But she was magical and unbelievable. And we were just talking and reminiscing about the first time around. No one had ever seen leg warmers or headbands or fashion leotards. But you went to the gym, and now this became another place where in your aerobics class, you might meet your future husband or meet your future husband lifting barbells or weights or something. But it became an entire fashion craze. And I knew guys that made a fortune just importing leg warmers and headbands. Also, guess what? The introduction of spandex. Unreal. Oh my God, you could actually wear clothing that stretched, clothing that was comfortable. Yeah, so it became a big push how you were going to bring that into your everyday life. Well, one thing was you just went to the gym every day. The whole thing with Calvin Klein was twofold. It was this very famous "Nothing Comes Between Me and My Calvins," which later went to Kate Moss, but it was also Calvin Klein introducing workwear. You got to wear trousers. You could borrow from the boys. I mean, I have to say, Calvin Klein was really a visionary, and they had it all. From fabulous suiting, which quite frankly was a mass-produced version of Armani, introduced in the 70s, to fashion jeans. And then I'll never forget when Britney Spears came out wearing bedazzled, bedecked denim, and that just took the whole industry 8,000 degrees further. Here's what happened. We get to the late 80s. We're in workwear, we're in oversized suits, we're in big shoulder pads, and we love it. And your whole identification when you went to the gym was you were an active girl. You were powerful because you could do an aerobics class, but you were also part of a team mentality. Everybody wore leggings and ankle warmers. Everybody wore a headband. So once again, we're into that herd mentality. And then what? Kurt Cobain? Grunge, and that kind of throws the industry into a tizzy. And I'll never forget, there was no pre-publicity about it, but I will say that Anna Wintour loved Marc Jacobs, and she was the one that guided him into doing his infamous and famous grunge runway show. Yeah, and there is his wife, Courtney Love, kind of the exact opposite of Carolyn Bessette, and we'll get to that in a minute. And so the 90s was, I would say, the first time in a quarter century where fashion became very confused. If you were going to wear grunge, you didn't really need to buy it. I mean, yeah, Marc Jacobs came out with $3,000 tie-dyed t-shirts that were all ripped and torn and a skirt to match. And yes, it was a statement, but it was a side statement. It was a stop to momentum because it was nothing that you could wear to work. And unless you lived in a pretty big city, it wasn't really anything that you could wear on the off days either. I think that there was a huge kind of blowback when Kurt Cobain died. And Courtney Love was, and I used to get my hair done beside her. Oh my God, what a character. But definitely nobody where I said to myself, oh my God, she's so beautiful. I wish I was her. It was more like, thank God I'm not her. This started to muddy up the waters, but I'll tell you what it did do. It became the first time that streetwear dominated how we looked rather than runway. And it became the beginning of the end of fashion as a dominant arbiter of social status because I don't know, does it make any sense to you that Balenciaga copies a Birkenstock sandal and then sells it for $1,500 when you could get it for $80? But that's what happened. High end started pulling from low end. The father, he's much forgotten today, which I think is really a shame. Father of fast fashion was a guy named Alan Schwartz, and his company was called ABS. And he was the first one to bring fast fashion to us. What is fast fashion? You see it for thousands of dollars on the runway, and within a matter of a couple of months or a month, a la Zara, it's on the floor selling. So you get to be part of couture at an affordable price in a timely manner. So he would bring his whole team to Paris. I don't know how he did it, but he was so influential in all department stores, especially Bloomingdale's and Macy's. And he would get front row at every couturier runway show. They had hidden cameras, like your watch was a camera, your ring was a camera. They took notes. They had tape recorders. And they went straight from those runway shows onto an airplane to China. And I swear to you, within 2.5 to 3 weeks, those gowns were your MOB gown, your prom gown, your bridesmaid's gown, and they were on the floor of Bloomingdale's and Macy's and selling. Incredible. And then, of course, Zara, which was formed in 1975 solely as a Spanish store in Spain, comes prominent for doing the same thing as mass retailer. I mean, Alan Schwartz made a fortune. He was very famous in his time, but he's sort of been passed over by the sands of time. Now, for grunge, we've got a counter in the 90s. Remember, honestly, the 80s into the 90s was the strongest time for fashion magazines. Vogue, Bazaar, Elle, which I love, and a million Mademoiselle, Glamour, it went on. And another magazine, haha, George. So now fashion bleeds into politics with JFK Jr.'s magazine and Cindy Crawford, legendary, on the cover. And who comes along with that? Carolyn Bessette. And what is that all about? Minimalism. So now you've got, on one hand, the push and pull of grunge and Courtney Love, and the clean minimalism and modernism of Carolyn Bessette, and the ultra glamorization, is that a word, of the fashion industry, because Carolyn Bessette worked at Calvin Klein as a PR girl. And the myth, oh my God, if you took a job in fashion, could you hook an American prince? Could you have a legendary boyfriend? Well, hey, why not? Everybody wanted to be in fashion. But you can see through the decades, there is this constant push and pull. The minute one thing is inserted, like the 60s, Flower Child, Mod Girl is inserted, architectural, severe, completely opposed. So the 90s become grunge and clean minimalism with a dream behind it, a Camelot kind of dream that this is going to get you where you never even dreamt you could go. You know, I didn't love Carolyn Bessette because basically every single photograph was of her looking miserable because the marriage was difficult. And you're thinking to yourself, how could you be difficult when you married this guy? And oh my God. But looking back on it after Love Story, the serialization of it, I could see where it really had its place in grounding fashion. In the meantime, magazine sales towards the end of the 90s are slowing. And what the magazines become is, if you have, let's say, fall fashion, huge issue, spring fashion, huge issue, 500 pages. 150 pages are just ads. And all the magazines look the same because they're photo shoot ads from the same manufacturers, like Michael Kors, Calvin Klein, and 50 pages, maybe tops, are fashion editorials. And even for a fashionista like me who's in the business, They didn't represent anything that made any sense to me. They weren't anything I wanted to wear or could even interpret for my brand, DG2. And I also saw where they were just leaving the public behind. And then we see it weakening and weakening to the point where I'm not thinking that print magazines account for much money today in the world of conglomerates like Condé Nast. I heard that Vogue actually was maybe only going to do 2 big magazines a year and everything else was a podcast. But now it has switched to youth and celebrity, and most of the runway shows in Paris are just evening wear that a celebrity is then going to turn around and wear on the red carpet. And guess what? I think for the first time ever, there's no opposition of 2 major trends like grunge and Americana minimalism. There's no trends, and everything is available, and everything is fast fashion, and almost anything you see that's reasonable. I'm not talking about, amazing $50,000 evening wear gowns, is going to be there for you at a price, and we're lost. I'll tell you what, even for me as a fashion girl, I've made no inroads into fashion. Now, I am older, and it's tricky for me. It's got to fit. It's got to be comfortable. I didn't used to need comfort. Almost anything used to fit me, but I do have my criteria now for getting through a day, and you're left on your own. And I don't think that benefits fashion, but I wonder if you feel that way too. Like, I used to follow Vogue like just crazy, and we used to call it the fashion Bible. And if it told you to wear orange and brown together, you wore orange and brown together. If you couldn't, it wasn't their fault. It was your shortcoming. I had criteria. I had guidelines. I had a lane I was in to follow. And now, I will tell you what, and I've said it before, I live Manhattan, the fashion capital of America, one of the fashion capitals of the world. And if you stand on the corner of Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue and 57th Street, prime shopping area, you wouldn't know what city you were in. You could be in Cleveland or Detroit or Austin, Texas, because there's no more fashion criteria anymore. Want to wear short shorts? Wear them. Want to wear pajama bottoms to the airport to get on a flight? Who's going to stop you? It is a slowdown of the metabolism of fashion as a major force. It used to dictate to the outer world every morning that you dressed who you were, what you thought, what you believed in, what you were doing, where you were going, and what social strata and financial strata you were at. Hey, so if you know me, you know I am a big believer that red light is the future of wellness and beauty. Mito Red Light is my new absolute favorite. It's like giving your cells a power boost. It's incredible. So red light therapy helps support energy, skin health, and even reduces inflammation. All with the simple power of light. Red light, that is. I use mine every day, and I can feel the difference. If you want to glow from the inside out, check out Mito Red Light, because your cells feel energized and you feel unstoppable. Use my code below on mitoredlight.com for a discount and see why red light therapy is lighting the way to better aging. Mito Red Light. Power your cells, power your life. Today, good luck. Every man for himself. So I'm going to ask you this question because I love to have you as the audience interact with me. Did you love it better when we all had our orders and guidelines to follow about how to dress or who you were? And were you proper, and were you an upscale housewife, or were you a career girl? Or do you like it better now, where it's just whatever, whenever, however? I want to know. I hope you enjoyed a little fashion history, and may you always stay too young to be old. Thank you so much for listening to Too Young to Be Old podcast.
The episode may be over, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Diane Gilman, or visit our website, thedianegilman.com. If you like the show, leave us a rating or a review and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And until then, don't forget, age is just a number. Together, we'll prove that we are all too young to be old.